Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. President Biden withdraws from the 2024 race and puts his endorsement in the spotlight on Vice President Kamala Harris.
It is now Harris for president, not Biden for president.
Our Eamon Javers reporting, and Axios' Mike Allen on Harris's road from hopeful Veep to potential nominee.
Most people don't know her. She has a golden moment here to introduce herself, define herself.
And Vinod Khosla, an independent venture capitalist who hosted a Biden campaign fundraiser in May, now calling for an open Democratic convention, but he will still support Vice President Harris if she's the nominee.
I do believe she has a good chance of beating Trump, and beating Trump is more important than winning the presidency.
Plus, Warren Buffett selling $1.5 billion worth of Bank of America stock, and Delta still recovering from the biggest global IT outage in history just a couple of days ago. Remember that?
What did you guys do?
You should have seen us walking in here.
3 hours of television.
It's Monday, July 22nd. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. And obviously the big story is really looking at politics this morning and seeing what's going to happen.
Let's get right to it. Talk about the future of the presidential race. This after President Biden dropping out and endorsing Vice President Harris. Eamon Javers has more with us this morning, working overtime all weekend.
Yeah, good morning to you, Andrew. We're told that Kamala Harris spent about 10 hours yesterday working the phones at the vice president's mansion here in Washington, D.C. She was surrounded by friends and aides and family. She was eating pizza for dinner last night in her sweatpants, making calls to more than 100 officials as she tries to gear up momentum for a presidential campaign on very, very short notice now that Joe Biden has dropped out of the race. Kamala Harris, you'd have to say at this point, absolutely the front runner, but has not clinched the Democratic nomination. That process will be official, we're told, and will start on Wednesday of this week with a meeting at the DNC, which will be televised and available on YouTube for everybody to watch. So some fascinating behind-the-scenes moments last night. One indication that those phone calls were starting to pay dividends is the fundraising success that Kamala Harris had overnight. The campaign releasing this information saying, since the president endorsed Vice President Harris yesterday afternoon, everyday Americans have given $49.6 million in grassroots donations to her campaign. To put that number in some perspective, Andrew, the Trump campaign raised about $112 million, I believe, in the month of June. So Kamala Harris coming, more than a third of that, if my math is right, in just one night indicates some pent-up demand among Democrats to start pumping money into this campaign. And I think you can imagine that the big donors will also start to do that after they've been withholding money from the Biden campaign in protest of Biden's decision to stay in the race. I think all of that money will now shake loose and head toward Kamala Harris unless another candidate gets into this race. It's not clear at this hour whether or not that will happen. Some of the big feet in Democratic politics have not endorsed Kamala Harris yet. No endorsement yet from Barack Obama, for example. Nothing from Nancy Pelosi. The big names in this party have not moved behind her definitively, and that leaves a little bit of room open for somebody who might want to challenge her. The question is whether there's anybody in the party now who wants to try to do that. Andrew?
So let's talk about that. There's been speculation that Manchin might want to get into this race. I don't know what you think some of the other Democratic candidates, if you think they're going to get into this race. And
Manchin became an independent earlier this year, right?
And then there's the secondary question of who do you think she may choose for her vice president and how impactful that could ultimately be.
Yeah, I mean, look, so one interesting dynamic to watch for is all of the sort of mid to lower tier people who'd been mentioned as possible presidential candidates themselves who endorsed Kamala Harris in the first hours yesterday, including Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, a governor in an absolutely crucial state, moving to endorse Kamala Harris yesterday. And I think if you look at that, you can say, well, that might be the beginning of a vice presidential campaign by Shapiro. Pete Buttigieg also endorsing yesterday. He's somebody who's well liked among Democrats for his ability to go on Fox News and talk directly to Trump supporters about, sort of the Democratic perspective on things. Those folks who are moving to endorse Kamala Harris very quickly garner some goodwill, maybe put themselves in a position to be
Mark Kelly on that list. We talked about Mark Kelly a week ago.
On the predicted list, it's 84 cents for Kamala Harris. Michelle, she's 5 cents, but Michelle Obama, 7 cents, Hillary Clinton, 5 cents, Gavin Newsom, 3 cents, and then a lot of people at 2 cents, including RFK. Not that the betting sites mean anything, but in addition, Hakeem Jeffries, nothing there, Eamon, and Chuck
nothing
Schumer.
From Chuck Schumer,
nothing there.
Nothing from Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, he mentioned Pelosi.
The big feet,
Obama.
The big feet have yet to drop the shoes, to mix my metaphor. So there's still some shoes to drop here.
And they're saying open convention. That is something. I don't know if everybody comes, like if Pelosi, Schumer, Barack Obama, if they all come and endorse her, then is it really an open convention, or is it? Someone would have to emerge that says, I want to do something, right?
So, somebody has to come out, I think, today, right? I mean, I think Kamala Harris, if she goes more than 24 hours into this without opposition, I think that she has it locked up. The Democrats might move to do a virtual convention before the official convention to wrap up the voting and then make the convention sort of this big marketing push that they traditionally have become in American politics, where there are no uncertainties on the convention floor. It's just an advertisement for the candidate. They may want to do that and do this early.
But they wanted to do that with Biden, and the delegates were pushing back, which is part of the calculus that went into Biden's decision on that, too.
Exactly right.
Eamon, can you go through just two pieces of this? The money piece, meaning money that went to Biden, we're talking about $95 million, goes to her.
Yep.
That money you believe unavailable to others. There's obviously a big question mark. Republicans may actually go to court even over the fact that she could get the money. There's also the idea that maybe if she were the candidate, that maybe the money could move elsewhere and that people would just sue each other over it. I'm curious sort of how important you think that pot of money is on a relative basis to the billion-plus, dollar pot in the PAC world.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the pot of money is important, right? Because, money helps a campaign do all the things that campaigns do. So it's not unimportant. That said, Kamala Harris has control of that money as a candidate on that ticket. They've refiled the paperwork with the Federal Election Commission last night. It's now Harris for president, not Biden for president. And Kamala Harris controls that money for now. If she was to be defeated for the nomination and some other candidate X becomes the Democratic nominee, there is the possibility that Kamala Harris could then donate that money to the Democratic National Committee. She could move the money to a super PAC that would operate independently of the presidential but run ads in favor of the presidential candidate. There are ways to deploy that money for somebody else if that's what happens, but Kamala Harris would have to be A, defeated, and B, agree to do that. So that's sort of the tricky nuance here.
They refer to it, Bolton calls it the lame duckery of President Biden. J.D. Vance says if he can't run, he probably can't exercise the duties of the presidency. But whatever we do, we're going to be in this weird sort of limbo until we decide. And I don't know whether other countries, there is a lot going on in the world, and it's happened before that we get tested. But some people point out that maybe foreign policy already is sort of run by committee, and that maybe is the way it should be between now and then. And others say, what's better, President Biden with this committee or an untested Vice President Kamala Harris as president if Biden were to leave? And it's a lot of it is fraught with uncertainty and risk in a dangerous world.
Well, look, I mean, the United States has had lame duck presidents before. It's a fairly common thing. So that's, take that off the table as a concern.
Not to this extent, though. This year, I mean,
the
25th Amendment.
We've had second-term presidents, right?
Yeah, but
in this case,
he's dropping out. Yeah.
In this case, right. In this case, the idea of Biden resigning the presidency and handing the presidency itself over to Kamala Harris early, Biden, and people around him are signaling that's not on the table. I will say that it's a little unusual that we didn't hear from Joe Biden yesterday on camera. We just saw this letter posted to social media. We had a war of sort of pre-written statements, a flurry of things from the various candidates, but nobody coming out on camera yesterday. Biden not addressing the nation. Remember, when Lyndon Johnson did this much earlier in the cycle back in 1968, he did address the nation in that famous line, you know,
I saw that.
I won't seek and I will not accept the nomination.
Come to you with a heavy heart.
We didn't hear that from Joe Biden yesterday.
Eamon,
So
last
that
piece.
is, I think, something that is raising eyebrows, and people would like to see Joe Biden. It's not clear when we'll see him and what he will say when we do see him. They said simply later this week sometime, so it's a little bit vague when we might see Joe Biden.
Eamon, can you help us with the last final piece of this, which is the Ohio piece and being on the ballot and the timing around that and just the machinations and permutations that could take place? Again, this goes to the fundamental issue of who is on the ballot and the timing of that.
Yeah, I mean, there was some concern by the Democratic National Committee that they had to move early to get on the ballot in Ohio before their convention, which is relatively late in August this year. It's not really clear whether that concern was driven by Biden loyalists who were trying to early up the nomination to get him in there quick before there could be any fracturing of his support, or whether that's real legal concern. We're going to have to take a look at that and see whether there is any problem here with Kamala Harris getting on the ballot in Ohio or anywhere else. I would imagine there's going to be a flurry of lawsuits from Republicans in states across the country anyway challenging this, because why not? And I think there will be some effort by Republicans to challenge the money piece as well, again, because why not? Although while those lawsuits are proceeding, Kamala Harris and or candidate X will be spending that money aggressively all the way through the fall. So depending on the timeline of the legal calendar, it might not matter practically anyway, because they will be able to spend money as they go along waiting for those lawsuits to be resolved.
But there are other states, too, not just Ohio. If you change the top of the ticket, I saw Nevada and a couple other states where they were really questioning this. So I think your point is the right one, that
I would imagine you'll see ballot
swirling.
access lawsuits across the country.
Yeah.
Okay. Eamon Javers, thank you for helping us through all of this morning, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot more in the coming hours and days. Thanks.
And now to some of the fallout from Friday's global computer outage caused by CrowdStrike. Delta Airlines struggled to recover over the weekend, canceling a third of its schedule yesterday. And it's already canceled more than 10% of its mainline operation schedule for today. That's more cancellations than any of the other U.S. airlines. And CEO Ed Bastian apologized and offered affected customers some frequent flyer miles. In a statement late yesterday, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg acknowledged the disruptions at Delta and said the department expects Delta to provide prompt refunds to customers who choose to call off their trips entirely. He said the airline should also provide timely reimbursements for food and overnight hotel stays for customers that were affected by the delays and the cancellations.
Berkshire Hathaway selling about $1.5 billion of Bank of America stock in recent days. That's according to a regulatory filing that came late Friday. It is the first time that Berkshire has trimmed that stake since late 2019. Berkshire still holds a stake of Bank of America worth nearly $43 billion. B of A's stock is up nearly 27% year to date. It was up 7% or more just in the last month. And it hit a 52-week high after its quarterly results last week. This is interesting because Berkshire, up until this point, had owned 12.8% of the bank. Because they own more than 10%, they have to file within 3 days of any sales that they do or any changes in their ownership structure on that. So you're getting this very early look at this. This comes after Berkshire had already long cut stakes of Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, USB, and Bank of New York Mellon, or BNY, all of those stakes and other banks that had cut to this point. First time we've seen a cut in Bank of America again in about 5 years.
Cheese will be next.
Next on Squawk Pod, will the 2024 election be prosecutor versus convicted felon? Axios' Mike Allen on Vice President Kamala Harris's chances at the Democratic convention and among American voters.
Make no mistake, Vice President Harris has epic advantages here, including her command of the campaign structure, raised $50 million overnight, and the DNC, the White House, her historic status, all formidable advantages.
Plus, who would be her running mate? Veep stakes again.
She has the history. I don't think you'll have two history makers on this ticket.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Squawk Pod from CNBC, where Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin are digesting an historic weekend for American politics.
Stand by, Joe. His mic. Cue.
President Biden stepping aside as the Democratic nominee, endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris for the spot. Joining us now is Mike Allen, Axios co-founder. Mike, good morning. It's good to see you. Do you expect today for former President Obama or Speaker Pelosi, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, will they do it today? And if they don't, are they really holding out the possibility for somebody else at an open convention?
No, they're not. So the Democratic Party recognizes that their nominee is going to be Vice President Harris, and she plunged in yesterday, spent 10 hours on the phone with labor leaders, civil rights leaders, business leaders, congressional leaders, like making calls to solidify her position. Those leaders have held back a little bit because the Democratic Party may want to have a mini process, like allow the possibility for other voices. They just don't want people to be able to say the Democratic Party is being undemocratic. But Joe, make no mistake, Vice President Harris has epic advantages here, including her command of the campaign structure, raised 50 million overnight, and the DNC, the White House, her historic status, all formidable advantages.
The Donald Trump himself, just any candidate probably gets X number of votes just from being not Joe Biden at this point. But Mike, it's probably fair to say that some rehab probably needs to be performed somehow on the vice president, given just the overall perception for the past couple of years, whether it's the border or some of the, I don't know, some of the quotes, some of the moments that we've seen. You know, if you're anti-Trump, it's not going to matter at all. She's also 19 years younger, so right out of the, she can also, you know, just focus on women's health and abortion, et cetera.
100%.
But
Joe, that's a great point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, that's a great point. Democrats are going to say, you want to talk age and fitness? Bring it on. You're right. She's 59. The president is 78. Totally correct. Reproductive rights, a central issue for so many people. Like, she suddenly is able to talk about that in a central way, potential game changer. And Joe, a huge frame that you're going to hear from Democrats is they're going to talk about the prosecutor. She's the former elected DA of San Francisco, Attorney General of my home state of California, the prosecutor versus the convicted felon. So you're going to hear a lot of that. But yes, Joe, you're right. And what Democrats will say is most people don't know her. She has a golden moment here to introduce herself, define herself, talk about those issues. But Republicans say this was a sinking ship. Doesn't matter who you put at the top of it. Republicans' three-point plan, Joe, is going to be, one, they're going to say everything we were going to say about Biden on inflation and crime, everything we were going to say about Biden, she owns that. Plus, we're going to say, what did she know? When did she know it? Like, was she complicit in not revealing the president's condition? And they will say she was given the responsibility for the border. How did that turn out? So, Joe, all of that is why Jim Vandehei and I, in a column at the top of Axios this morning, are calling it the chaos campaign. America tossed into uncertainty we haven't seen since the 1960s.
They'll also talk about not even getting to Iowa the first time around, probably, as not a great presidential candidate. They're also going to talk about that she's further left, much further left than Joe Biden, although he seemed to go along with the party pretty much in that wing. But they'll say that they're going to brand her as like an ultra progressive.
No question. What Republicans were saying to me is we wanted to run against liberal leftists, and now it's easier. You have somebody who's literally from California. The Harris campaign, now it's officially the Harris for President campaign, will push back. She'll be able to talk confidently about how she was actually a very tough prosecutor, which, Joe, you'll appreciate the nuance of this, was actually hard for her to discuss when she was running for the Democratic nomination. Now it's a plus.
Right. Marijuana, people in jail, and and when she was asked if she smoked marijuana, she was laughing about, oh yeah, I did, but they're in jail. I don't know. It's weird.
Hey, Mike, we've heard from a lot of folks over the last 6 months who desperately wanted President Biden to get out of the race. You even heard from the Bill Ackmans of the world for a long time before they decided to endorse or put their weight effectively behind former President Trump, this idea that they were really just trying to get Biden out of the race in hopes that there was somebody else that was going to come in his place. The question is, do you think that any of those people who sort of were pushing for that but then ultimately landed in the Trump camp switch again?
Did you see what Ackman tweeted, though?
Yeah, I did. And that's why
he's not coming back.
He's not coming back. And that's why I'm asking the question, Mike.
Hope springs eternal.
Yeah, there's been very little sign of that out of the box. And I can tell you that President Biden, who finally yielded to what those people have been saying for months and months, were told that it was finally the data that did it, that there was just no path, that over the past 3 weeks since the debate, like, they tried everything. Nobody could give him data points that showed him winning. But this is where Republicans feel like they have huge momentum after the convention. Like, people are, just based on human nature, people are unlikely to switch back. And they came out of this incredibly strong convention. Now Democrats, who have just 4 weeks till Chicago, 100-ish days till the election. That is a short time to try to reboot a campaign, to introduce a candidate to much of America, get all the wings of the party flapping in one direction. That is all a lot.
Mike, how important, therefore, is the vice presidential nominee?
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, they're never that important, right? But
well, maybe in this case,
they are. This case, it's probably more important than ever to say, yeah, well, we do have someone. It's very strange because you'd like to pick someone who you could see taking over. They didn't do it last time, but you could pick someone that you could see taking over as president or even being not co-president. I don't know. It's bad to talk about it that way because you're giving the vice president short shrift. Vice President Kamala Harris. Why does she need a great vice president? You don't talk about it that way with other ones. So you're immediately going to get the sexist comments and everything else, Mike.
Well, I think a different spin on that, and the usual approach with the vice president is the physician's creed, do no harm. And in this case, I think we'll see somebody who will broaden her appeal. So as your viewers know, Democrats, now Vice President Harris, absolutely have to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. The ticket currently down in all of those states. Who can help them there? So look for a moderate Democrat, somebody who, like, she has the history. I don't think you'll have two history makers on this ticket. And this is a place that data will come into play. Like, who can
Gretchen Whitmer
seal this deal? Because I can tell you, Democrats suddenly feel this is very
Michigan would be good.
But you're saying you don't see two history makers, meaning you don't see two women on the ticket?
I can tell you there's some Democrats are reluctant to do that. That conversation has not been had, has not been run. Governor Whitmer, absolutely very popular across the party, like instantly a front runner for whenever the next time the job is open. But Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, who's going to play there? I'm going to look for that because that is what ultimately sealed President Biden's decision. And the campaign knows this is the ticket to win. And after watching President Trump in his speech, they're like, this guy is beatable. They're going to try to figure out how to do it.
I just wondered. Josh Shapiro,
Pennsylvania.
But, I mean, if you're talking no history makers, Josh Shapiro is Jewish. That'd be history making.
Right.
Pete Buttigieg would be history making. Are you knocking out all those demographics, Mike?
No, not at all. And I not making any prediction because I doubt that decision has been made. That will be one consideration. Like, what will be the broadest appeal to the most American?
What do you think of the names like you've heard McCraven thrown around, you've heard Mark Kelly thrown around? Does that change the dynamic?
Yeah, so Admiral McCraven, Make Your Bed would be a creative pick, very popular with business. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, someone who's gotten a lot of conversation in the last couple of days. Like, again, those are people that are going to speak to a broad swath of America. Somebody who's additive is what I would look for.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for your coverage.
Appreciate it. Let's know what you hear when you. I think. I don't know. Those other people got to get on board. I think that's kind of glaring. It's not who endorses you, it's who hasn't endorsed you at this point. But you figure it comes around.
What do you think the chances are that, like, Manchin literally jumps in the next 24 or 48 hours?
I think every time we hear he might, he never does, and I don't.
But I mean, he's not jumping into the general election. He's jumping into the Democratic delegates, and the Democratic delegates may not be very friendly to somebody left the party.
That briefly made me think. I like him. Briefly made me think. It did. So that he may know that.
We haven't talked about the other Sorkin's recommendation. Aaron Sorkin's recommendation.
No. Been there, done that. No thanks.
The Mitt Romney.
You wouldn't vote for him ever.
That would be so interesting.
He didn't pay any taxes in his entire life, Harry Reid said, till it was proven that he did.
You don't think that would be an interesting move?
He's got a file full of women, and he's got a binder full of women. No, go away. You've had your chance. You're a horrible candidate. Manchin.
But he still would have to go through the DNC.
That's a problem.
This is
Manchin Hogan. Bring him back.
Would be interesting.
Well, you're just a watcher.
I'm just watching.
You want me to say things, but you're just a watcher.
Correct.
Coming up, famed venture capitalist Vinod Khosla is an independent who has vocally and financially supported Democrats. Now he's calling for an open convention and says he's prioritizing the critical values in this election, unlike some of his peers.
Peter Thiel and his group, the PayPal Mafia and crypto, just are fundamentally extreme libertarians. Nothing wrong with that, but crypto is not a thing that you should hang the election on.
More Squawk Pod right after this. This is Squawk Pod.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. After President Biden announced he was dropping out of the 2024 race for the White House, our next guest took to X, calling for an open convention and said the country now has a, quote, unique opportunity for a better, moderate path, unquote. He also got into it with Elon Musk, and so we're going to get to it, on all of it, with our next guest. Joining us right now, first on CNBC, is investor Vinod Khosla, founder of Khosla Ventures, and somebody who's donated for a long, long time to the Democratic Party. Vinod, it's nice to see you this morning. Lay out your case in terms of, just before we get into the Elon of it, how you're thinking about what an open convention would be and who you think would even emerge to be in such an open convention.
Oh, Andrew, just to correct your statement there, I'm an independent who's contributed to Democrats over climate issues, but also to Republicans, including John McCain and others in the past. I do think we should have a process because we didn't have a Democratic primary, so it's important we have a process. I'd love to see many more people. If Joe Manchin wants to run, great. I prefer climate candidates. But I do think we should have the process is more important than a coronation to get more support broadly. It'll even be better for Kamala. I believe Kamala can beat Trump, but I think it's pretty important. The process is important.
What do you think of her?
I haven't spent a lot of time with her. And frankly, most of the policies we've seen in the past 4 years are Biden's policies. As you know, the vice president effectively doesn't have a huge role in policy. I think she's a tough prosecutor, so she will be tougher than Biden. But we have to see what happens. Just watching the previous debate, it's been clear Democratic presidents have done better than Republican presidents on the economy in the past. But despite the narrative, I do think an independent middle path is what this country needs more than anything else.
In terms of a potential running mate for her, is there somebody you would like to see join that ticket if that ultimately is the ticket?
I don't have a preference yet. I haven't seen the slate of candidates she's considering. I was more focused, and this was before yesterday as things were breaking. I'm very much and still am in favor of an open convention.
So, but part of the issue is that there may not be an open convention, partially because she's been anointed potentially, and partially there's a question mark as to if you were a candidate or somebody that you thought could be a nominee, and I'm thinking of a Governor Whitmer or others, maybe you think to yourself, you know what, I want to try this in 28. I don't want to try this now.
Oh, clearly, there's political calculus going on. I think even if she's the only candidate running, I'll be comfortable with that, because I do believe she has a good chance of beating Trump, and beating Trump is more important than winning the presidency.
So explain that. I was going to say yesterday, Elon Musk took to Twitter and said to you, come on, Vinod, Trump, Vance, let's LFG, let's just say exclamation point, exclamation point. And you took to him and you said, hard for me to support someone who has no values, lies, cheats, rapes, demeans women, hates immigrants like me. He may cut my taxes or reduce some regulation, but there's no reason to accept depravity in his personal values. Do you want a president who will set back climate by a decade in his first year? Do you want his example for your kids as values? Elon went back to you and said he doesn't hate you. In fact, I think he likes you. Meet him and find out for yourself. Would you like to have a meeting with former President Trump?
I have no interest in meeting him. I have made up my mind. So occasionally you do make up your mind. I think his supporting the January 6th and insurrection, trying to violate the democratic process, trying to support Trump, the 2025 agenda, those are very, very dangerous things. Our institutions are more important than the economy the next 4 years. And then the economy and climate are two really critical issues. But frankly, his values and his support of the insurrection are what completely kills him for me, even if he would have the economy do better, which I don't think is true.
Vinod, how do you think about so many of the other peers and colleagues of yours in Silicon Valley that seem to have switched gears, if you will, being very vocal in favor of former President Trump?
Look, there's one group of people mostly around the PayPal mafia and crypto. Peter Thiel and his group, the PayPal mafia and crypto, just are fundamentally extreme libertarians. Nothing wrong with that. But crypto is not a thing that you should hang the election on. And frankly, I think Trump can be bought. They gave him enough money and he supported crypto in exchange. That's not how the process should work.
Well, the description, and I thought it was, I rarely hear such hyperbolic Trump derangement syndrome just verbalized, just without any sort of embarrassment at all. But with that said, the other people that, and maybe you'll say all they care about is tax cuts or enriching themselves, but when you say that all these people, these good people out there, are supporting a rapist, treasonous insurrectionist, you're either throwing them in the same category as the person they're supporting, or you're saying that you're smarter than them for being able to see that in Trump. How do you feel comfortable? How do you feel comfortable putting people, some of your peers out there, in the same category as a rapist, insurrectionist, traitor?
No, what I'm specifically saying is they don't value those characteristics They prefer less regulation, which is a
it's all
reasonable
about
thing, as I said
deregulation
before.
in their wall. It's all about money, all about furthering their own self-interests in their business. They're willing to completely ignore all this moralizing and judging that you're totally comfortable in doing.
I think values are important as examples.
So
for
they're
our
wrong
kids.
about they have no values.
I think they don't value enough. They don't value values enough. I do.
But you do.
I do value the insurrection.
Right.
I value long-term institutions.
You must
more
feel
than
very good about yourself.
deregulation.
That's good. Okay.
Well,
that's fine.
Yeah, you can engage in hyperbole as much as you like. I just happen to disagree that we should elect a person like that.
Right, as you've stated. Okay, just a lot of people that do disagree with you, and I just don't think they're all bad people or deplorables.
I don't think they're all bad people. So let me be clear.
Well, they're stupid. They're either bad or stupid.
No, they can value values less than they valued less regulation. That's what they're saying.
Okay. Vinod, in terms of just of what comes next, and also I'm curious how you think about using your own pocketbook, if you will, to support one of these candidates. There's been a number of folks who effectively went to the sidelines and said, I'm not going to do anything while President Biden was running. How quickly do you think that changes? Obviously, we saw Kamala Harris raise something on the order of $50 million last night, but there's still a whole number of people who haven't come out. We've also haven't seen President Obama or Pelosi or Schumer endorse Kamala Harris. Is that a good thing, a bad thing?
If you want an open convention like I do, I think it's a good thing more people haven't endorsed Kamala. I do think Kamala can win the open convention, but and she can beat Trump. But I think the process is as important or more important than anything, and a coronation will never be received well.
Vinod, we got to run, but I have one last question.
And Hillary Clinton are doing old-style politics, which is a shame.
Final quick question for you. Do you think as a venture capitalist, given that we've seen Mark Andreessen on one side, you on the other, Peter Thiel on the other, that this is going to change the kind of companies either that you ultimately invest in or that that startups go to? Meaning, do you think that there's going to be a political alignment that's going to happen with the various players in Silicon Valley?
I don't believe so. I think we will invest in what we invest in, and that's based on technology progress and technology opportunities. And in fact, I think we'll do it unrelated to the tax rates or regulation. I do think less regulation helps, so I'm a fan of that. But in some areas like climate, regulation is a really good thing.
All right. Appreciate it. Vinod, thank you for waking up early, for talking us through your perspective on all of this. Thank you.
And that's the pod for today, this Monday. Long couple of years this last month, huh? We are so grateful that you are here. Thank you for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. You can tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern and get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears. Listen anytime you want when you follow Squawk Pod. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.